Hi, I'm Hannah Jones and welcome to this week's MASTS CASTS, the weekly online update video about what's been happening in the MASTS community this week and things you should know about. In this week's edition, I chat to Andrew Johnson, a new associate professor at Heriot Watt University, about his research interests and also a recent publication of his. And I also chat to Jordan Grigor from SAMS about a publication of his which discusses an arctic marine species once thought as carnivorous but has now shown evidence that it's actually an omnivore. This week's MASTS CAST was presented by Dr. Davina DeRoos from University of Aberdeen, and her talk was titled, What is a Healthy Dolphin? Towards New Ecological Relevant Health Markers. If you weren't able to attend this talk, don't worry, it's been uploaded to our YouTube video and that is linked below. Next week's MASTS presenters is Lucy Novoveska and Adrian McLeod from SAMS. Their talk is titled Algae Treasure Chest, Unlocking the Potential of Microalgae and Macroalgae in Scotland. There's still time to register for this talk, so please check out the registration link that is below this video and you'll be able to attend that session next Wednesday at 1 p.m. If you see a talk that you find interesting and you would like to attend, please make sure that you register because then you are able to participate in the live Q&A session as well. If you aren't able to attend, don't worry, all recordings will be found on this very YouTube channel here. We are ending on the 2nd of September as we're giving ourselves a bit of a break before the MASTS Annual Science meeting in October, with a lot more information about that to come in the next coming weeks as well. If you would like to actually present a webinar and you work on climate change, there is the opportunity to participate in Scottish Government's Climate Week. This is happening from the 14th to the 18th of September, and they are looking for speakers to do 20-minute talks to people in Marine Scotland, but also Scottish Government in general. If you are interested in participating in this, it's a really great way to advertise your work and actually connect with people in policy. Please check out a video that is above here. And that is my conversation with Bernie about that very week and how you can get involved and what they're looking to do with this climate week as well. And now an opportunity for people involved in blue carbon. Are you a recent graduate involved in blue carbon in the last 4 years, or are soon to be a recent graduate in this discipline? Well then, SNH are looking for someone to fill their graduate placement scheme. This is a 1-year position that closes on the 2nd of August, and the candidate will be working closely with SNH, Marine Scotland, and also the Scottish Blue Carbon Forum. There's a lot more information available online, so please check out the link that is below this video if this is something that would be interesting to you. Now, before we get to my chats, I would just like to highlight that earlier this week, NOC released its 5-year strategy plan. This is a document that outlines its new goals, its shared ambitions, and also its shared values too. So if this is something that you would quite quickly like to check out, please look at the links that are below this video. There is a video which is about 5 minutes long, and also the document itself. So links for that are below this video. Now for my chat with Andrew Johnson, a new associate professor at Heriot Watt University at the Lyell Centre. I asked him to explain just about his research interests, and also we then delved into a conversation about his recent publication which looked at marine mammal bycatch in Southeast Asia.
So I started at Heriot Watt in the middle of lockdown, but before that I was running my own business as a marine consultant, specifically working in small-scale fisheries. And before that, I was doing a postdoc in San Diego, California. So this is me being fresh back in the UK. My expertise is around fisheries in general, but largely small-scale fisheries, as I say. I'm trained as an ecologist, but I now work a lot in the economic side of things as well. Nice to be in Scotland.
Yeah, and from what I've seen online, you have travelled all around the world with your work. Very lucky.
Yeah, I've been very lucky. Yeah.
And you've recently just had a paper published in Endangered Species Research titled Getting to the Bottom of Bycatch, a GIS-based toolbox to assess the risk of marine mammal bycatch. And in this paper, you talk about a toolkit that's called Bycatch Risk Assessment, BIRA. Do you mind explaining a bit more about that specific toolkit?
Sure, yeah. So the work was actually funded by NOAA from the US, and the reason they funded it was because NOAA have now, well, they're starting to implement a new rule that means if a country shows that it has high bycatch risk to marine mammals, they will start kind of severing trade links for seafood products. So I was basically contracted by NOAA as a fisheries expert to join a team of spatial analysts and marine mammal experts. And we went to Malaysia, Thailand, and Vietnam and ran a series of workshops to try and understand how to support these nations in providing data to NOAA. And the result of that was designing this toolkit, because there's a very common problem in Southeast Asia particularly, where they don't collect data on marine mammal bycatch, or not enough, to satisfy, US requirements. So basically BIRA, which is the bycatch risk assessment, is an open source toolkit. Is available now online that allows people to estimate their levels of bycatch risk in their waters, but it doesn't necessarily need to have loads and loads of data like we might benefit from in the UK, for example. So it's a low data approach to estimation.
Mm-hmm. And because you've just said it's low data and it's been worked in workshops in Asia, are you hoping to expand the accessibility of this toolkit to other countries potentially?
Yeah, so the paper that you mentioned has kind of some preliminary results for those 3 countries that I mentioned. There's another paper coming out, I think, next month, which is the very heavy kind of phone book methodology about how the whole thing works. I'm talking to a couple of agencies to run the same set of workshops in Cambodia as well. It actually had some interest in the UK for certain areas that are data poor. So it's applicable anywhere. If you've got a lot of data, it works very well. If you've got low data, it will still work. But the main hurdle we wanted to overcome was the fact that there's no point in just sitting down waiting for data to magically appear. You can still do stuff when you have very low data. Before we even think about real quantitative data, most of it is about meeting with all the fisheries stakeholders in country and discussing what they have, what their needs are, and also then going into communities and looking at LEK, which is the acronym for local ecological knowledge. So speaking to fishermen, fisherwomen, and asking them where do they see marine mammals, which gears do the marine mammals usually get caught in or interact with, and then from that we build a much larger picture. So it's a co-design process with communities.
And a large picture, but also a more local picture, I guess, as well, one that allows us to not adapt to whatever the situation is in the season as well. Exactly. That must have an influence, I guess, as well.
Yeah, exactly. It can be used very case specifically, but then if you have enough of the jigsaw pieces, you can zoom out and give theoretically a whole national picture of bycatch if you run enough workshops.
If this is a paper that you would like to read up on, please check out the link that is below this video. It is open access, and also keep an eye out for that paper that is coming out in the next couple of months, all about BIRA and its nitty-gritty methods as well. Next up is my chat with Jordan Grigor from SAMS about a recent publication of his, which revealed a previously thought carnivorous species of arrowworm, which resides in the Arctic, can now actually be considered an omnivore due to his research. But first off, I had to ask Jordan, what is an arrowworm?
Yeah, they're called worms. They're called arrowworms because of their shape. They kind of look the shape of an arrow with a pointy tail and a round head. But they form part of the zooplankton, right? So zooplankton mean drifting animals. And they could be really important in food webs just because of how many there are.
Okay, that's excellent. And you recently have had a paper published looking at 2 particular species of arrowworm in the Arctic. Can you just explain what that research was all about, please?
In the Arctic, you've got 2 main species, and they're called Parachuta elegans and Uchronia hamata. And these species may be found in the same areas, but they look quite different to each other. And actually, their behavior and their adaptations are quite different. So we had a whole year of samples from the Canadian Arctic, the Beaufort Sea, and I was able to analyze them and look at the diets of these 2 species in the Canadian Arctic throughout the whole year.
Excellent. And what did you find about these 2 species and their diets?
What I want to say about these animals is that they have quite a ferocious reputation. They have been called the tigers of the plankton. And why? Well, because they look horrific. They have massive teeth, sharp teeth and claws on their heads, and poison glands. So you would expect to find a lot of copepods in their guts when you look at their guts under the microscope. And these are for animals that you bring in nets from the ocean back to the lab. That was not the case. In fact, one species had a lot of green stuff in its guts, which later we found out to be diatoms and phytoplankton, so plant material.
Okay, so a species that was considered to be totally carnivorous is actually an omnivore. And why is that of interest, really?
So there's something important here when it comes to climate change. And we know that the Arctic is being rapidly changed due to global warming. What you can see is that, for example, and this is recent kind of studies are showing that diatom blooms might increase, or phytoplankton blooms might increase in the future in the Arctic, and the number of phytoplankton available might increase. Reason being is because the ice is melting with global warming, and more sunlight is able to get into the water and actually stimulate growth in the phytoplankton. So that's an interesting dynamic. We want to know how that would affect the arrowworms. Arrowworms eating diatoms as well could be very important for something called carbon flux, okay? Because the arrowworms might live near the seafloor. They produce these that poo pretty much. They poo out whatever they've eaten. And that stuff could end up in the seafloor sediments where it could sequester carbon. And so their contribution in that way is kind of unknown, but it could be important.
If you would like to read more about this paper that Jordan and I spoke about, please check out the link that is below this video. Before I end today's Masscast, I would just like to ask you one question. Are you a curious individual? If so, then you'll be pleased to know that the Royal Society of Edinburgh is organising a huge series of free online talks from the 7th to the 30th of August. These talks cover many very different topics and involve experts in their fields. They cover from gaming, sleep, marine science, fiction, non-fiction literature too. And so I'm sure that there's going to be something in that program that you will find interesting. It's recommended that you register for any of the events that you do like the look of, and you'll be able to find more information on the links that are below this video about Curious as well. That's everything from me, so stay safe and have a great weekend.